Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. All right. Testing 1, 2, 3. All right. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. All right. All right. In 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, ladies and gentlemen around the Delaware Valley, welcome to the Soloff Zervanos Show here on WWDB Talk 860. We've got a great show. We're here with our host, John Zervanos. John, how are you, sir?
I'm good. As far as I know, Joe, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's always a good thing. Today's...
You never really know. You never really, do you?
No, you really don't know. And
Something may be lurking inside you that you don't know anything about.
Exactly. Having said that, one thing leads to another, and you're one of the premier medical malpractice attorneys in the state of Pennsylvania. And one of the things I want to talk about, it's an astounding statistic, but medical mistakes and medical malpractice are ranked as the number 3 cause of death in the United States, which is astounding. And so we're going to explore that discussion because, it's the question is why. And so having said that, okay, and the way they lay it out there is medical errors and preventable mistakes are widely estimated to be the 3rd leading cause of death in America, behind only heart disease and cancer. Okay, depending on the study, it could mean that more than 250,000 Americans lose their lives every year because of preventable medical errors. Okay, so that is absolutely, John, fathomable. And so obviously when you think about that, is it number one, is that true, and where does that number come from?
I've seen it posted on I believe it's a government statistic, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But that 3rd leading cause of death has been posted around on the internet, but I do believe it's a government statistic, frankly.
So what exactly qualifies as a medical error versus an unavoidable medical complication that would be unavoidable?
Well, I think the way you have to look at it is medicine is an imperfect science, and you can do everything correctly and still get a bad result. And that's not medical malpractice. That's just, the situation you're in. Everyone does their best. Your condition is such that it can't be effectively treated, or, not every surgery is successful. And again, that's not a result of medical malpractice. When you have situations where a diagnosis could have been made earlier and was not, and someone's prognosis changes as a result of that, you argue that, well, that's a diagnosis that could have been made. They failed to make it. And because they failed to make it, the cause of this condition is a result of that breach in the standard of care. That is malpractice. You got medication errors that can lead to someone dying.
Well, what we're going to do as part of the show is we're going to talk about the top 10 different types of medical malpractice. We're not going to get to that yet because obviously we're going to get to that the mid show. But having said that, how many when we talk about a medical malpractice case, okay, how many of them result and I know we might not, but give me a percentage of how many result in death.
You mean in my personal experience?
Yes.
I can't give you a hard number. The cases that resulted in death in our practice here were, if I remember correctly, okay, and that's kind of something I want to make sure everybody understands, were usually a result of someone had a tumor that was malignant, that was seen on a scan of some sort, MRI, CAT scan, whatever. And that tumor was not treated at the time. It was maybe very small, or stage 1, or some stage where that cancer could be effectively treated. And unfortunately, because of the delay, the cancer worsened. And in the cases that I've had, metastasized, which means it migrates to other parts of the body. And then the prognosis in those patients drops dramatically. And I've had patients die in the course of our representation, usually in that context.
Now, are you seeing more
Well,
medical?
I'll give you another example. Wait,
Sure.
before I finish, because he's thought of another example. I've had cases where somebody shows up at an ER, they present with symptoms, and the ER doctor fails to identify the emergent nature of the symptom. And I'm not talking about a heart attack, because that happens sometimes, but I'm talking about another cardiac emergency that went undiagnosed, that with surgery, the person had a very significant chance of surviving the problem. And because he was not able to make the diagnosis, that person wound up dying in the hospital while they were waiting to somebody else. So that can happen. That's another example of a client that died. Obviously, when the family came to me, the individual had already passed away. I have 2 or 3 cases right now where the cancer was not diagnosed when there was a positive image of something that was very, very concerning, that there was no follow-up on it. And it led to the cancer becoming far worse, and in some cases leading to more significant aggressive treatment that would have been avoided had the cancer been diagnosed earlier.
Now,
And that, that's everybody's nightmare. That's why you hear, on these commercials, get tested, go see your doctor, have annuals, make sure you pay attention to what's going on in your body, because if something unusual is taking place and you ignore it, you contribute to the problem. But if you get to a doctor and a problem is identified sooner rather than later, it's pretty much textbook medicine, that you have a better chance of recovery if the diagnosis is, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get that.
that's okay.
If the diagnosis is early. I've
So-
actually had on the witness stand, I've actually had a defense doctor, defense expert, try to explain that the fact that our client's cancer was not diagnosed early didn't make a significant change in her diagnosis, which was really remarkable in that case, because it was a brain cancer case. And, it led to some real catastrophes. And I don't know why. I don't know if my little girl is still alive, but that was really a tragic case. But I remember that case when the doctor was up there. He was hired by the defense, and he tried to convince everybody that early diagnosis wouldn't have made a hill of beans difference in her case, which was completely contrary to everything we hear on TV, what's advertised by the pharmaceutical companies and so forth.
Yeah, having said that, you know, my wife, and this I might as well, so we ended up, I'll run this by you. We ended up going to the hospital in the middle of the night about 3 months ago. We thought she was having a heart attack. Turned out to be something called pericarditis. Okay, and it's a inflammation of the heart sac. Okay, and um, however, in the process, they found nodules on her pituitary and her lung, and what they said was they want to monitor them. I always remember our conversations, and I'm not real sure I should be comfortable with that. I don't even know what monitor means. Okay.
But I think, yeah, there are nodules that you'll see on a scan. Some are plainly obvious to you as you're reading it that looks like cancer. There are also nodules that are benign, and a radiologist or someone who's trained to look at these images will tell you the distinct features associated with a cancerous tumor versus a non-cancerous tumor. But they want to monitor it because it may develop into something more significant. So it's okay. You're not going to run and go get a biopsy every time you see something, where you're sticking a needle in there to see what that is. Unless you really are concerned and suspicious, that's sometimes what you have to do. And in some cases, let's say in an older individual, if they have clinical signs of a certain type of cancer, and then you look on the study and there's this lesion, you can't really identify whether it's cancer or not cancer, but in the age group that patient is presenting, and in some of the clinical history that may have occurred in that person's case, it almost requires you then to go in there and definitively identify whether that lesion is malignant or benign. And that in older people, that sometimes is even more something that you have to be more cognizant of. And I'm only saying that from my experience as an attorney that does medical malpractice, and I'm using the cases that I've had as examples. And I know I'm being very general because I can't speak as a physician.
Right.
Mind you, I'm not giving you the exact circumstances of the cases that I'm talking about, because some doctors listening to this program right now and say, well, that's patently false. And because I'm really kind of generalizing everything.
Yeah, no, you're talking as an attorney. You're not a doctor. I get it.
A doctor. Right.
So are we seeing more when you think when, are we seeing more medical malpractice these days?
It's hard for me to answer that question. You know why? Because 10 years ago, I really didn't do any medical malpractice. So 10 years later, that's the majority of my practice. So, I get calls, lawyers refer me cases, and I'll tell you that in my professional experience, I'm getting more calls than I ever have. Do you see more malpractice? Does more malpractice occur? I can't answer that question. I can tell you this, that there have been steps taken by the legislature in Pennsylvania, and that was several years ago, where there were measures taken so that the medical community can better self-govern itself, so that errors are reported, and if they're reported, there's some self-governing there, so everybody's taking notice of what happened, so that it doesn't happen again. And I don't care what anybody says. I got clients that come in to see me sometimes and say, I'm doing this because I want to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else. The fact that you're filing a lawsuit isn't going to, you can't make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else because you're filing a lawsuit. But what it will do is if you're filing that lawsuit against that physician for a particular issue or allegation that you're making, I can almost guarantee, unless the doctor's just completely oblivious and not interested, he's going to remember that case. So if the same issue is presented in another patient, he'll remember that case and maybe take that extra step that's necessary to prevent it from happening to another patient. And that's what I tell my clients. That may be the practical effect of what your lawsuit may have on the patient's population in the future who may present with similar symptoms as you. There's also, when you say that, when I told you there's these certain reporting requirements, in doing that, if a questionable situation arose and that something concerning happened to a patient or a course of treatment in a hospital, the hospital is supposed to send a letter to the family or the client or the patient and advise them of this untoward event that occurred. That's also part of the act. And again, that's an effort. That was part of the legislation that was passed to put people on notice that potentially something happened, and that's what they're supposed to do. But it's really more self-governing, and the state is supposed to look into these things. You know, as a patient, if you want to make a complaint, you can make a complaint with the state, and whether they choose to investigate it or not, that's entirely up to the state attorneys to decide whether or not they want to investigate it. So there's efforts made. The long and short to your question, and the answer is that there are efforts being made to almost force the medical community to do a better job at governing itself. And they've had the peer review situation. The peer review has existed for years in the medical community, where if something happens in a hospital, there's a peer review committee that evaluates the situation, and there's investigation done internally to determine whether or not something happened that shouldn't have happened. And what they do with those results inside hospitals, I have no idea. But I can tell you, as lawyers, we're not entitled to ever gain access to that information if it's done in the context of a peer review. And the point of that is so that the peer review is really effective and, you know, peels back every onion so that they can get to the bottom of what happened. And if you know that a lawyer might get access to that information, they might not be as honest with their evaluation and analysis and investigation. So that makes sense to me. I understand why they're doing it. Now, if there's an investigation that's done outside the context of a peer review, then we always argue that we're entitled to that information and that investigation. But that's like, that's an effort and a half that you try to argue to the court that you're entitled to that. And sometimes you get it, and sometimes you don't.
In general, why do most medical malpractice situations occur?
Wow, I wish I could. I'll tell you. We had a show months ago, regarding the waits in emergency rooms, and I think we had one of our state representatives that was involved in trying to get legislation that would pass that would help better staff emergency rooms. But I can give you two examples that just really are very, very obvious to me, not just as a lawyer, but as a member of the public. And that is that a lot of these ERs are totally understaffed. And the reason why you wait so long at an ER is not because they don't have any room at the end. It's because they don't have enough people staffing the ERs. And that's why people are waiting and waiting and waiting. And that's obviously related to, you know, how much it costs and so forth. And there's issues there. But if you don't have enough people staffing your ER, it's really difficult then, it's very challenging rather, to provide optimal care. Because if you're busy and you're running from one place to another, I don't care who you are, you're not going to be as focused and you're not going to have the ability to give the best possible care. And that happens with us. When we're really busy, we can make mistakes because we're not 100%. Well, we try to be 100%, but when you're that spread out, bad things can happen. The other reason in my mind that mistakes happen, especially in some of these hospitals where you have residents, the young doctors that are in training, these poor doctors literally don't have 8-hour shifts. They don't have 12-hour shifts. Some of them are there for 24 straight hours, and they're completely sleep deprived. And if you're expecting a young physician who's already in the learning curve, okay, and we'll all tell you we never stop learning. Even experienced lawyers, experienced doctors are always learning. But you take a young doctor who's assigned the task of identifying medical emergencies, okay? If you're rotating on the floor of a hospital and you've been up for 20 straight hours and the nurse calls you because you're rotating on the cardiac service or whatever, and you go up and see the patient and you're a walking zombie because you haven't had enough sleep and you're going from one patient to another, and it's your responsibility to identify what's going on and then contact the attending if it's really an emergency, that's another recipe for disaster. And I will ask a lot of experienced physicians, how is it that you can allow young physicians who are assigned the task of being the gatekeepers in a lot of cases, identifying a medical emergency so that the service that they're working on can be advised of a problem, when the poor guy who's not really experienced, for one, he's getting his experience, that's how they learn, but two, is sleep deprived. And I don't know about you, Joe, but when I'm sleep deprived,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not working on all cylinders. And now you're putting your health in the hands of inexperienced young doctors who've been up for 18 straight hours and they're bouncing from one patient to another. I don't know about you, but it doesn't take a lot of logic to recognize that that's a recipe for a problem.
Yeah, no question about it. John, let's take a quick break. We're going to have more from the Soloff Zervanos Show in just a minute. Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Do me a favor. I want you to
Yes.
quick mute on your speakers.
Okay.
Okay, testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. You can hear me, right? Can you hear me? Okay. What's happening is my auto is your speakers are picking up my auto. That's and so let me just see this 12:35. We're gonna, because I'm reading something real quick. All right, you don't have headphones or earbuds, right? You don't have headphones or earbuds. Okay. I didn't think so. So real quick, the fix is, if your headphones are, turn your lap. Okay. Can you turn your laptop speaker volume down? Come off of mute and turn your, what's it called? You see, now I can, now there's an echo coming back. because
Now
I'm
I
going
now
through your
there's an echo
speaker.
coming back because I'm going through your speaker.
Okay. And so that's what the problem is. I'm reading
Okay.
this now.
So
And
that's what the problem is. I'm reading this now.
and it's only
And
because we're recording. In other words, you don't hear the sound
and it's only
because,
because we're recording. In other
you know,
words, you don't hear the sound
when you're
because
doing a regular Zoom.
you know
Um,
when you're
okay.
doing regular Zoom.
So if
Um. Okay.
yeah, it's your microphone is picking up my
Yeah, it's
picking up your
your
speakers.
microphone is picking up my picking up your speakers.
Okay, so let's
Say it again.
your
Okay, so let's
microphone where
um
you're speaking is
your
picking up your
microphone
speakers. So
where
when I talk,
you're
it's
speaking
coming through
is
your
picking up your
microphone.
speakers. So when I talk, it's coming through your microphone.
Um,
Well, I think we had this problem before. Um,
you don't hear it.
I gotta have a hard stop in about you don't by 12:50. I gotta go because I gotta be somewhere at 1.
Okay, do me a favor.
Um,
Turn your. I got you. Turn your
Okay, do me a
your
favor. Turn I
your
got you. Turn your
laptop speaker
your
volume down.
laptop speaker volume down. Let me see if I can get Jen down back here.
I'm going to start coming to the office again until we get this.
I just turned it way down. I just turned it way down.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Made a difference?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna speak lower. Testing 1.
I'm gonna speak lower. Testing 1.
All right, John. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna speak lower, ask you short questions because I don't hear any echo when you're talking.
Ask you short questions.
And you sound great.
I don't hear any echo when you're talking. You sound
so
great.
let's just do that. All right, and then
let's just do that.
until we get this fixed.
So you want me to keep the mic down low? You want me to keep the mic down low as I just did?
Well, I can't hear your voice now, so it's just your.
Because now, Joe, there's a delay. Now there's a delay. So go ahead. I'm turning it up again because there's a delay. Before there was no delay.
Right, and so, I'm going to ask you a question, and then you just take it because there's no echo when you're talking, only when I'm talking.
And then you just take it because there's no echo when you're talking, only when I'm talking. Okay.
All right. So.
So
I'm going to ask. So, John, put your speaker on mute real quick.
John, put your speaker on mute real quick.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. I want you to keep your finger on mute until you talk. When you're done talking, put your finger back on mute, and that's how we're going to do it. Okay. So I'm going to come back in, and I'm not going to talk when you're talking because the show's going great. In 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Soloff Zervanos Show here on WWDB Talk 860. We've got a fantastic broadcast. Medical malpractice, the number 3 cause of death in the United States. We're talking to our host, John Zervanos, who is one of the premier workers or medical malpractice attorneys in America and in the state of Pennsylvania. And we're asking why medical malpractice is, why the statistics are that high and what are the causes and what are the top 10. John, is medical malpractice usually, typically there's, one individual, one defendant, but is it usually caused by, one individual or often more than one? You talked about individuals that are, obviously sleep deprived. You're 100% right on that. Whenever I'm sleep deprived, man, I can't focus or anything like that. So does it normally happen as a cause of more than one person or more than one factor?
Well, that question is, again, more difficult to answer. You have situations sometimes in a hospital setting where there's a system breakdown, usually in communications. And if you have a communication problem, that involves a lot of it involves a lot of the treatment personnel. And that means that if an order is written down incorrectly or that it's not translated correctly or understood correctly, you can have a mistake made. There's communications between a resident and the service that he's covering, nurses versus doctors. Or you can have a situation where the system that's in place that was adopted by the hospital with their policies, a policy that allows for certain mistakes to occur. Um, let's like, I'll give you an example. Now, when a radiologist reads something, an image, there's oftentimes someone else that will read it as well, so that there's almost a second pair of eyes or some kind of foolproof system in place, so that it's almost like there's a consensus. And that has been adopted in a lot of radiology departments around the country and in hospitals, so that you can prevent mistakes from occurring, or things missed on images. Now, that's a policy that was put in place because somebody thought, well, maybe it'd be a good idea that we have this opportunity to take a second look at it. Now, that might delay time in getting the interpretation out, but that's like a policy or a system that's in place to help prevent a mistake. That would be something that you could blame the hospital for by not having the effective policies in place. Or this whole 24-hour idea of keeping doctors awake forever, and then that's how mistakes get made. That you can blame on the hospital. Or you don't have enough people staffing an ER, or somebody doesn't show up and you don't replace them, and you don't have a system in place where a replacement could be made very easily by taking them and transferring them from one department to another. So you're asking me, can you blame more than one? Oftentimes, you can have an individual, a direct cause of action against the hospital for not having policies in place that could have prevented the problem. And then, the hospitals are oftentimes liable for the actions of their agents. So most lawyers are not limited to pointing the finger just at a physician. There's oftentimes a reason to point the finger at other entities or people in the course of treatment.
Having said that, if you had to run through a list, okay, top 10 areas of medical malpractice, I'm going to throw down the list that you already said the number one on the list, which was misdiagnosis or delayed diagnosis, surgical errors, medical error, medication errors, how prevalent, and birth injuries. Those are areas where that you've talked about a lot. Okay, the fifth area is failure to treat. Okay, can a doctor correctly diagnose something but still commit malpractice when they don't order a treatment, not referring to a specialist, ignoring worsening symptoms, premature discharge from the hospital?
Yeah, of course. You can be a doctor, you make a correct diagnosis, and then you fail to send them to a specialist who then can treat the problem that you've just identified and diagnosed. Um, and that's malpractice. I have a situation right now where, um, well, not totally that, but you can make a diagnosis and say, okay, you have this problem, but then not send them to the specialist that needs to address that problem. Now, as a patient, when you're told you have a problem, you need to understand, well, how do we treat my condition? How do we treat this? And a lot of times, you know, a lot of patients don't ask the questions that need to be asked. And I'm not blaming people for not having the ability, because most people don't have a working knowledge of their problem. So they don't even know the questions to ask. And so I don't want to sit here and say, well, you got to blame the patient, because I hate that. I hate when the defense comes in and tries to blame the patient. But there is some responsibility that you have as a patient. I tell my clients and I tell people, you know how you get the best medical care? You advocate for yourself, and the squeaky wheel gets greased. You have to ask the questions. You can't just take, well, Dr. So-and-so says I have this problem. Okay, well, what are they doing about it? All right. You got to be able to ask the questions that need to be asked, to advocate for yourself, to make sure you're getting the best treatment possible.
What about anesthesia mistakes? What about anesthesia mistakes?
Well,
John, you're on mute. You're on mute.
sorry, I was on mute. I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
I haven't had too many cases where anesthesia mistakes have occurred. Oftentimes, well, not often, but this can happen where you're trying to position a patient in the correct position so that you can get the anesthesia administered correctly. And there have been positional injuries that have occurred to people's arms and legs because they were positioned the wrong way, or positioned in such a way for a long period of time, where they come out and they might have, impingement in their nerves or some kind of nerve injury as a result of the way they were positioned. That's not necessarily malpractice in a long surgery, but it's the anesthesiast's responsibility to make sure you have them positioned such a way that they don't have an injury as a result of how you positioned them or how you trait them. But they can happen.
Okay, so let's do this. I know you have to go, and we're doing a short broadcast, but we're going to be doing part 2 of this show. And when you talk about medical malpractice and the many reasons that combined make it the number 3 cause of death in the United States, which is a staggering number. Emergency room errors, we'll talk about that the next time. Obviously, even hospital-acquired infections or failure to obtain informed consent, nursing home and hospital negligence, all kinds of different areas that we're going to get into. But I appreciate that we're talking to John Zervanos about kind of shedding some light on this situation, because just a staggering amount of cases. I think 250,000 in the United States. John, before we go, can you give your contact information if somebody wants to get in touch?
Sure, it's SoloffZervanos.com, and we have 24-hour service, so you can contact us at any time, and the information or the message will be sent to us pretty much any time, day or night, because of email and so forth. I'll give you the number to our office is 215-732-2260. But if you want to learn more about our firm, just go on to soloffandzervanos.com. There's page after page stories of the cases we've had. There's bios on each lawyer, and you can learn as much as you want or as little you want about our firm.
All right. I want to thank everybody for tuning into the Soloff Zervanos Show here on WWDB Talk 860. We want to thank our host, John Zervanos, and of course, everybody at Soloff Zervanos. On behalf of John Zervanos, I'm Joe Doherty. Thanks for listening, everybody. Okay, John, you can unmute it. Okay, all right, so I think we got enough there. You can unmute it. And I'm going to actually, this never happened to me either. This never happened to me either. So before the next show, we're going to obviously, I'm going to, have somebody stop by. I'm going to do a Zoom and figure this out because I'm going to, have somebody stop by. We're going to do part 2 of this show. And, can't. We're going to do part 2 of this show. And, can't.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is stuff that I know a lot about. I don't feel comfortable about getting into specifics about cases that I have, but next time I might do it.
All right, well, we'll check that out. Technically speaking, though, I've never had this issue either. Check that out. Technically speaking, though, I've never had this issue either. So we'll send somebody over. We'll figure it out. All right, thanks, John. We'll send somebody over. We'll figure it out.
Okay, thanks, man. See ya.
All right, thanks, John.
See you, Joe. Bye.